Thanks, Michael. And thanks to everybody so far. It's been a very, very good discussion. Just in relation to Professor Doherty's statement, and I think it's a good statement. There's obviously certain parts I disagree with in relation to treating people that she will obviously see in relation to being diagnosed with serious illnesses. And I understand, like, there is a huge amount of fear in relation to one's mortality, in relation to one's own life. It's a very fundamental question that each of us probably will maybe have to ask ourselves in relation to our own lives. And there's an acceptance sometimes that our life may be cut short in relation to a diagnosis. And that's very, very difficult to quantify. It's difficult to understand for everybody, regardless of yourself and your family and so forth. But there is a very compelling argument in relation to those that are coming to the end of their life, where they should have a choice. And I think this is, I guess, to the fundamental point of why we're discussing this in relation to one's choice, one's say in how they want to die. And I think when they're in that situation, and obviously there is, I suppose, a situation where people, they're tested to their limit in relation to their capacity, in relation to their own life. But surely in that situation where somebody is coming to the end of their life, surely they should have a say in how their life ends. And in that situation, that's where I'm convinced where assisted dying should be legislated for. It's limited to a certain degree, and obviously as legislators, if we if we recommend assisted dying, regardless of what the criteria is, it's up to us, if it's legislated for, then it's up to us as legislators whether to stay as it is or obviously review any piece of legislation. That can be applied to many, many, many things in legislation. But in that situation, and I'm sure you've dealt with many scenarios where somebody that probably won't die in the immediate future, but that probably wants that feeling they actually probably want to die because they don't know what's ahead. And I understand it's a perfectly kind of legitimate human emotion. But surely in situations where somebody is come to the end of their life, surely in that situation, somebody should have a choice of Valium assisted dying.
Thank you very much, Deputy. I think you raise a really important point, which is, I suppose, the primacy of autonomy in the debate. Now, I'm not by any means an ethicist, so I'm very reluctant to wade into the moral arguments around this. I suppose what I prefer to stick to, because it's where my knowledge is around the area of, I suppose, the facts and the vulnerabilities of certain populations. And I suppose, the 6-month cut-off that you've described for people with terminal illness and, people who are very clearly going into that stage of their lives, they would be the people, I suppose, that are covered by the law in Oregon, for example, where there's a very, and it hasn't changed all that much in 20 years. It's been quite stable. But again, I suppose the worry I would have is that is the population where we saw the increased rates of suicide in older women, and also in terms of assisted dying in that population as well. So while in principle,
when they've been given that prognosis, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, but you understand why, because there are scenarios, and we all know them, where somebody does take their own life because they know what they're facing. And I've had first-hand experience with this, where they know, regardless of what kind of modern medicine we have, they're facing an extremely difficult number of months, and no human being should be able to go through that. And that's why I think scenarios where that.
Senator Ronan Mullen, please.
Yeah, I might pick up on that, and perhaps at some stage we.
Dr. Doherty maybe answer that question. If she wants, just wants it, maybe.
Yeah, briefly, yeah, no problem.
I mean, I think that is the real kind of nub of all of this, isn't it? It's around autonomy, and again, I don't claim to be an expert in ethics, but I suppose, if we could define it to that group, I think there would be very few people who would be against it. The reality is, though, it's about the impact that it has on the other people that that may very well need treatment that we're not be able to access for them at the moment. They would be the people I'm worried about. In principle, for a group of competent people, you know, I don't think anyone's going to go to war over that. It's really more about the impact that it has on the rest of society.
How would that, I mean, again, I'm not putting you on the spot by any means, but how would that have a knock-on effect in relation to somebody that's, you know, that has a very depressive illness, that could never ever avail of assisted dying? So I don't see how that would have a knock-on effect in relation to other groupings that could never avail of assisted dying because of the legislation that would be put in place and safeguards and so forth.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I suppose I've met quite a number of people, for example, who would be in that category of people that you've described, who, you know, who have been told that they have a very short length of time to live, and in that context they may have suicidal thoughts. Some I've seen have, you know, acted on them as well. But actually, when you treat any depression that they have, they can then change how they feel about it and actually have some enjoyment in the remainder of the life that they have. So it's really about making sure that we don't negate the benefit that that group of people can have.